right, welcome back everybody to the deep dive. Today we're gonna dive into the career of Dan Ashworth.
Oh, yeah.
And
Actually, be good.
yeah, it's a really, really interesting one. So we've got his Wikipedia page open,
Okay.
a whole stack of articles, reports, all sorts of things, just to kind of get a good overview of who this guy is, because he's been a pretty important figure in English football.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for the average fan, they might not realize just how influential he's been.
Yeah, that's really what we want to get at here. Like he's been behind the scenes for some really major changes.
Right, exactly.
And his career has been, I don't know, it's been kind of a roller coaster, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. Lots of ups and downs, big successes, and some moments that raised a few eyebrows, let's say.
Yeah. And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating, right? It's not just a straightforward success story.
Yeah.
It's about ambition, it's about taking risks, and sometimes those risks pay off, and sometimes they
backfire spectacularly.
Exactly, yeah. Like the whole thing with Manchester United, we'll get into that, but that's a prime example.
Yeah, can't wait to dig into that.
Yeah, so let's start at the beginning. I mean, his playing career, pretty modest, right? Eastbourne Town, not exactly a household name.
Right, yeah. Humble beginnings, you could say.
Yeah. And then he even goes and coaches in the U.S. for a bit. West Florida Fury, I mean, come on.
That's interesting, isn't it? Like, what was he doing there? What was the appeal?
That's what I want to know. Like, at what point did he decide, all right, playing's not really my thing. I'm gonna move into the more strategic side of the game.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what was going through his head. Was there a specific moment, a turning point, or was it a gradual shift?
Yeah, and when you look at his career, it's clear he's got this drive, right? This ambition to really make an impact on the game.
Totally. You can see that throughout his career, yeah.
And I think that's really evident when he becomes the FA's Director of Elite Development. And this is where we get the whole England DNA thing.
Yes, England DNA. The grand plan to revolutionize English football.
Exactly. This was a huge undertaking, wasn't it? Like, completely overhauling player development from the ground up.
I mean, it was a massive gamble. They were trying to change the very fabric of English football, the way players were trained, the style of play, the whole philosophy.
Yeah, so let's break that down a bit. What exactly was England DNA trying to achieve?
So the idea was to instill this unified playing philosophy across all age groups, right?
Yeah.
From grassroots all the way up to the national team. Consistency, that was the key.
Makes sense. But why? What was the thinking behind that? Was it about finally catching up with countries like Spain and Germany?
I think that was definitely a part of it. English football had this reputation for producing tough, physical players.
Yeah.
Not always the most technically gifted
Right.
or tactically astute.
Right.
Compared to some of their European counterparts. England DNA was supposed to address that.
So basically, create a system that produces players who are comfortable on the ball, more creative, more tactically aware.
Yeah, exactly. A more modern, fluid style of play. It was quite a departure from the traditional English approach.
All right, so big idea, big changes. But did it actually work? Did we suddenly see this generation of English superstars emerge?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The results, they've been mixed, to be honest.
Okay.
And there's still a lot of debate about the legacy of England DNA. Some argue it was too rigid, too focused on one particular style, and maybe it even stifled some of that individual brilliance that England's known for.
Right, you need a bit of both, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. You need the structure, the foundation, but you also need to allow space for individual flair.
So it's kind of a mixed bag then with England DNA.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that. It definitely had an impact, but whether it achieved all its goals, well, that's open to interpretation.
Yeah, it's interesting, though, because even if it wasn't a complete revolution, you can see elements of it in the way England play today, right? That emphasis on possession, the technical ability, it's definitely there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you have to give Ashworth credit for having the vision to try something so radical. It was a bold move, and it's definitely shaped the landscape of English football.
And it wasn't just the FA where he made his mark, right? He goes on to become technical director at Brighton.
Oh, yeah, and that was a really interesting period for him, I think.
I mean, Brighton were a club that were really struggling at the time, weren't they?
Yeah, they were kind of in a rut, no clear direction, and Ashworth came in and really shook things up.
And he did it his way, right? Building for the long term, focusing on young talent, establishing a clear playing philosophy. It wasn't about quick fixes or flashy signing.
No, it was about laying the groundwork for sustainable success. And you can see the fruits of his labor today. Brighton are a well-run club. playing attractive football and consistently punching above their weight.
Yeah, they're a model for a lot of clubs, I think. And then, of course, you have the move to Newcastle, right? Arrives as sporting director, just as the club's undergoing this massive takeover, new ownership, huge ambitions.
And that was a real statement of intent, wasn't it? Both from Ashworth and from Newcastle. It felt like they were ready to make a serious challenge to the established order.
So he'd proven himself at the FA, he'd done a great job at Brighton, but Newcastle was a whole different beast, right? The pressure, the expectation, the intensity of the Premier League, it's a whole other level.
Absolutely. And he wasn't afraid to make big decisions either. He oversaw a major restructuring of the club's football operations, brought in new players, new backroom staff, really put his stamp on the place.
Yeah, and you can see that he learned from his experiences, right? He wasn't just splashing the cash randomly.
No, there was a clear strategy behind his signings at Newcastle. He targeted players who fit a certain profile, young, hungry, with the potential to grow with the club.
Like Bruno Guimaraes, for example.
Exactly. That was a masterstroke. He wasn't a household name when he arrived. But Ashworth saw his potential and knew he could thrive in the Premier League. And he was right.
And that seems to be a recurring theme with Ashworth, doesn't it? Identifying potential rather than just chasing big names.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got an eye for talent, that's for sure. And he's not afraid to take risks on players that others might overlook.
And then comes the move to Manchester United in July 2024. I mean, that was huge news, wasn't it? Sir Jim Ratcliffe called him one of the best sporting directors in the world.
Wow. Yeah, high praise indeed. And the expectations were sky high.
Manchester United, they'd been struggling for years, trying to find their identity, trying to get back to the top.
And they saw Ashworth as the man to lead them back to the glory days.
But, you know, almost from the get-go, there were problems, weren't there? The whole gardening leave saga, the allegations about improper emails with Manchester United while he was still at Newcastle.
Yeah, those early missteps really cast a shadow over his arrival.
Yeah, it created this cloud of controversy that just never really went away.
And for a club like Manchester United, image is everything. They want to be seen as a class act, and this whole thing just didn't look good.
It's like the pressure was on from the very beginning.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Manchester United is a pressure cooker. The fans, the media, the history, it all weighs heavily on anyone who steps into that role.
So he finally arrives at Old Trafford, and it's just chaos, isn't it? Summer spending spree, Erik ten Hag gets sacked, Ruben Amorim comes in. It was all happening so fast.
Yeah, 5 months. That's all it took for the wheels to start coming off. And it's hard to know where to even begin dissecting it all.
Right, like was the spending spree justified? Were the right players brought in? And then sacking Ten Hag? I mean, that seemed like a panic move, didn't it?
It did, yeah. Especially considering Ashworth was supposed to be building for the long term.
And what about the finances? Manchester United spent a fortune in those 5 months. Was Ashworth given free rein with the checkbook, or was he under pressure from the owners to make a splash?
It's tough to say for sure, but it's a club where short-term results often seem to trump long-term vision, and that can be a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it's that classic tension, isn't it? Short-term versus long-term thinking. And it seems like at Manchester United, something had to give.
And give it did. Ashworth's departure after just 5 months, I mean, it was a shock, even with all the drama that had already unfolded. And the timing, right after a home defeat to Nottingham Forest, it just added fuel to the fire.
And of course, the official line was mutual agreement.
Oh, yeah, right, the classic mutual agreement.
But come on, nobody really bought that, did they?
Not for a second.
The rumors started swirling immediately. Was he pushed? Did he jump? Was his vision for the club just completely at odds with what the new owners wanted?
Yeah, it was a whirlwind of speculation, and the truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
So let's try to untangle this mess. What are the sources saying? Did Ashworth walk away, or was he forced out? And what does all of this mean for Manchester United going forward?
All right, well, let's dive into the reports, the insider information, and see if we can piece together a clearer picture of what really happened.
Let's do it.
So, The Athletic had a pretty interesting piece suggesting that Ashworth, he was feeling increasingly sidelined, in key decisions, particularly when it came to transfers.
So, like, he wasn't really calling the shots.
Seems that way, yeah. There are these whispers, about clashes with the new recruitment team that Ratcliffe brought in.
Oh, so they weren't exactly on the same page then?
Not quite, no. It makes you wonder, right? Was this like a personality clash, or was it more fundamentals, like a disagreement about the direction the club should be heading in?
Yeah, because if you look back at his time at Brighton and Newcastle, There's this clear pattern, right? Building for the long term, focusing on developing young players, creating, a sustainable structure.
That's it. Yeah, that's his MO, right? Long-term vision, methodical approach.
Exactly. But maybe at Manchester United, that was seen as too slow. You know what I mean? Like, they're a club that's used to winning, used to immediate success.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And the pressure to get back to the top, I mean, it's immense.
You can't really escape it, can you?
No, it's everywhere. It's like this constant weight on your shoulders.
So it's that age-old dilemma, isn't it? Short-term results versus long-term vision. And in this case, it seems like short-term thinking won out.
Sadly, yeah, it often does.
And that's the big question, right? Did Ashworth actually have the backing of the owners? Or was he kind of set up to fail from the start?
It's hard to say, really. But what is clear is that his departure leaves Manchester United at a real crossroads.
Yeah, big time.
I mean, they spent a ton of money, they changed managers, and they still seem no closer to finding, like, a winning formula,
So where do they go from here? Do they just keep throwing money at the problem?
Oh.
Or do they need to, take a step back and completely rethink their approach?
Well, that's what everyone's going to be watching for, isn't it? They need someone who can unify the club, someone who can create a clear identity.
And someone who can handle the pressure.
Oh, yeah, that's essential.
You need nerves of steel to manage at a club like Manchester United.
For sure. Because the scrutiny is relentless, the expectations are through the roof. It's a tough gig.
And what about Ashworth? I mean, his reputation has definitely taken a hit, hasn't it?
Yeah, there's no denying that. This whole Manchester United saga, it's going to be tough to shake off.
But he's still a relatively young guy in football terms, right? And he's got a proven track record. He's achieved a lot.
He has, yeah. He's got a wealth of experience, a clear understanding of the game. If he can learn from this experience, maybe refine his approach a bit, there's no reason why he can't get back to the top.
Yeah, maybe this is just a blip. You know what I mean? A chance to recharge, regroup, and come back stronger.
That's certainly possible. But on the other hand, maybe this is a sign that the game has kind of passed him by.
Oh, interesting.
Like maybe his methods just aren't suited to the modern game anymore.
It's hard to say, really.
Yeah.
I guess only time will tell.
Exactly. But one thing's for sure. The Dan Ashworth story, it's far from over. There are going to be more chapters, more twists and turns.
Oh, absolutely. This is just the beginning, I think. And, it's a story that really captures the essence of modern football, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It's got it all. Ambition, risk-taking, big money, high stakes, huge egos.
Triumph and disaster.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even the most successful people, they can stumble.
Right.
That the pressure at the top can be crushing.
Yeah.
And that in football, the line between success and failure, it can be incredibly thin.
It really can. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap things up. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the career of Dan Ashworth.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's been a fascinating journey, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And it's definitely a story that we'll be following closely. So until next time, folks, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.
So The Athletic, they had this piece suggesting that Ashworth was feeling, increasingly sidelined in key decisions, particularly when it came to transfers.
Yeah, like he wasn't really in control.
It seems that way, yeah. And there were these whispers going around about clashes with the new recruitment team that Ratcliffe brought in.
So there was some friction there.
Yeah, definitely some tension. And it makes you wonder, was it like a personality clash or something deeper? A fundamental disagreement about the direction the club should be taking.
Yeah, because you look at his time at Brighton, Newcastle, there's a clear pattern, right? Building for the long term, developing young players, creating a sustainable structure.
Right, exactly. That's his trademark, isn't it? Long-term vision, a methodical approach.
But maybe at Manchester United, that was seen as too slow. I mean, they're a club used to winning, used to immediate success.
Oh, yeah, the pressure to win is immense at a club like that.
It's relentless, isn't it?
Absolutely. You can't escape it.
So it's that classic dilemma, right? Short-term results versus long-term vision. And it seems like in this case, the short-term thinking won out.
It often does, unfortunately. Right. And that's the big question, isn't it? Did Ashworth really have the backing of the owners, or was he kind of set up to fail from the start?
It's tough to say, really. But what's clear is that his departure leaves Manchester United at a crossroads.
Yeah, big time. They've spent a fortune, changed managers, and they still don't seem any closer to finding that winning formula.
So where do they go from here? What's the next move?
That's the million-dollar question. Do they keep throwing money at the problem? Or do they need to, take a step back, rethink their whole approach?
Maybe they need someone who can come in and unify the club, create a clear identity.
Yeah, someone who can handle the pressure, too.
you need nerves of steel to manage at a club like Manchester United.
Oh, absolutely. The scrutiny, the expectations, it's a whole other level.
So what about Ashworth? Where does he go from here?
Well, his reputation has definitely taken a hit. There's no denying that. This whole Manchester United episode, it's going to be tough to shake off.
Yeah, it's a big stain on his CV.
But, he's still relatively young in football terms, and he's got a proven track record. He's achieved a lot.
He has, yeah. He's got the experience. He understands the game. Maybe he just needs to learn from this, refine his approach a bit.
Yeah, maybe this is just a blip, a chance to regroup and come back stronger.
Or maybe it's a sign that, the game has moved on. His methods aren't really suited to the modern game anymore.
It's hard to say for sure. Only time will tell, I guess.
I guess so. But one thing's for certain. The Dan Ashworth story, it's not over yet.
Oh no, not by a long shot. There are more chapters to be written, more twists and turns to come.
This is just the beginning, I think. And it's a story that really captures the essence of modern football, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
It's got everything. Ambition, risk-taking, big money, high stakes.
Triumph and disaster.
It's a reminder that even the most successful people can stumble, that the pressure at the top can be crushing, and that the line between success and failure in football is often razor thin.
Well said. On that note, I think it's time to wrap things up. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the career of Dan Ashworth.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a fascinating journey, and we'll certainly be keeping a close eye on what happens next. So until next time, folks, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.